In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Clay's AI web scraper so you can pull data from any website. This way, you can personalize emails at scale. Because if you do any sort of outreach, you probably know at this point that personalization is the best way to get any sort of replies and just stand out in general. But the problem here is if you were to do all of this manually, it's truthfully going to take you like hours. Now, that's obviously where Clay ends up coming in, because you can pretty much use their AI web scraper to automate this whole process at scale. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to use it to send hundreds of thousands of personalized emails every single month. But before we jump into Clay, we obviously need a bunch of websites to scrape. So we'll use Apollo to filter for our target customers, and then we'll use a tool like Ample Leads to scrape all of the data for cheap. This way you'll have all of the company names and websites and everything like that you'd want to bring into Clay. So I'm just going to show you guys real quick how I'd whip up a list. In this case, I actually pulled a bunch of website domains from Clutch, which is a platform for agencies. And then we're just going to add some job titles on here. Let's make it super simple. All right, so I just added some job title filters. We're going to use the domains to determine which companies we're reaching out to. We're going to make sure that they are all in the US, and then we're going to add a custom employee range, let's say 20 to 100. Perfect. Now, once we have all of this, essentially you're going to want to take your URL and you're going to want to pull it over into a tool like Ample Leads. There's a ton of these types of tools that are popping up right now, so just use whichever one is working at the time. You could try Ample Leads, you can try Apolloing. There's other people that are scraping it for super cheap, but this is the one we're using right now. And essentially you're just going to grab that, throw the URL into the section here, choose the number of leads, which in our case we had 6.2k, and then you're going to name, so it's going to be short form content agencies 20 to 100, and then you're just going to want to start scraping. So once you've got your data from Ample Leads, you're just going to want to pull it over into Clay. Obviously that just means downloading the CSV, uploading the CSV into Clay, and then just cleaning up the data, so removing any columns you don't need and adding those that you do. I've already started to do a couple enrichments here, but I'll dive into those in a sec. But now that the table is already set up, let me show you exactly how Claygent works. This tool can visit any website, understand what's on the page, and then pull any information that you're looking for. So if you want to know if a company is hiring, what sort of clients they work with, or where their offices are located, Claygent can pull that for you. Which means instead of spending hours, going to every single website and pulling this information, it's all done in minutes. But for it to work like any prompt, you obviously need to give it specific instructions for what to look for. Otherwise, you might get messy or irrelevant results. So let me show you how to set it up, and then I'll walk through the most useful ways to use it for cold email. So first thing you're going to want to do is go to add column, you're going to add an enrichment, and then you're going to look up Claygent. When it comes to configuration, you're going to want to choose whether you're using web, image generating, or modifying content. With web research, obviously that's going to be what we're going to be using today. That's going to be going to the website and pulling information, but create or modify content actually allows you to pull information from text that you already have, which obviously ends up being a lot cheaper. And then we don't really use to generate images from text too often, but you're going to choose web research. You're going to choose your model. We always like to use 4.0 mini. It's basically just the cheapest but most effective model to use for this type of thing. And then if you have your own GPT key, I'd recommend using this, or you can just use Clay credits. Kind of depends. This is obviously going to be a lot cheaper, but from there, all you really have to do is create the prompt for whatever it is you're looking for, and you can easily generate that with AI here, so you don't actually have to be any sort of like prompting wizard or anything like that. Pretty much just type in exactly what you're looking for, have it generate the prompt, test it on a few rows, see if it gives you the result that you want, and then tweak it accordingly. And then you're going to map your responses here, and if you want to have only run if settings like conditional logic, you can add that as well. But now that you actually know how to set it up, I'm going to walk you through a few different ways that you can use Claygent. And the first example is going to be scraping hiring information. Let's say you want to know if a company's hiring, because that's a direct signal to show that they're growing in the particular area that you might be willing to help them. Instead of sending a generic pitch, you can then reference this information to make your message far more relevant, which at the end of the day can not only make a huge difference when it comes to replies, but also meetings booked. So here's exactly how to set it up. So what you're going to want to do is open up Claygent here. And luckily I have a pre-configured template that I'm going to use in this instance. You can do the exact same for yourself as well. If there's a Claygent prompt that you're consistently using, you can save it as a template here, browse through your templates, and then it just prevents you from having to tweak the actual prompt continuously. So this is what we're going to use here. Essentially, we're using the company name variable, the website, and the LinkedIn URL, and pretty much asking it to look into whether or not this company is currently hiring for any marketing roles. We can, change this to whatever type of role we want, but because I already have this set as the template, I'm just going to use it for this example. And if you didn't have a prompt pre-made, obviously you can use AI just to come up with it. Basically let them know exactly the type of role that you're going to be looking to find. And then you're going to want to set it up with 4.0 mini. We use 4.0 mini here. And then for this one, you can see it's split up between like objectives, instructions, so on and so forth. You're going to want to lay it out step by step, and usually the AI does a pretty good job of doing this. But as with all prompts we run, we're going to want to do a quick sample, see what comes out of it, and see if we like the output. All right, so we've run the first 10 rows, and you can obviously see there's a ton of companies that aren't hiring. We had one that is. When it comes to any of these enrichments, we're always going to have to look at things from a conditional logic point of view. So if we're pulling multiple data points, we're going to want to know if one is true. If not, then use other relevant data point, right? So usually you'll want multiple to look through, or just have something that you can use in place if there's a situation where, a company isn't hiring or doesn't meet the criteria that you're looking for. I'll show a few examples of what that looks like in a few, but for now, obviously you can see just the one here. And again, we did that just by going to the website, looking for career job sections, go to the LinkedIn, look for job tabs, scan all job titles with the word marketing, and then, return whether or not they had the role and what the role was. You can also look at hiring from another perspective. If you want to look if there's a specific role to see if they are hiring for, you can do that. Or if you want to look at like number of open roles, that could be a good signal as well. Obviously, if they're hiring a larger number of a specific type of role, that could mean a higher value prospect. It kind of just depends on which direction you want to go. And just a quick example of what this could look like in practice. So once you have your hiring data all set up, and you've determined, if a company is hiring for a specific role or not, you can use it in a situation something like this. It doesn't have to be exactly this, but this is a good example. So first name, notice you're currently hiring for an influencer marketing specialist, but if you're open to alternatives, we built this exact role for Funko using our full stack influencer team, and it outperformed their last in-house hire by 3 times in 90 days. Something along those lines, basically just leveraging this information to 1, maintain relevance, and 2, offer up an alternative that might be cheaper, faster, better, more efficient, so on and so forth. Now, if you want to put more meetings on your calendar without having to put in all of this work in Clay yourself, you can book a call with me below. We'll map out your total addressable market, determine the highest leverage signals for your offer, and run personalized messaging for you at scale, just like we did for Relay Partners, who booked 42 calls in just 30 days. So if you want to see if we can do the same for you, just book a call below. Now, obviously I was mentioning conditional logic just a minute ago. If one piece of information isn't available, we want to use a different piece of information. So the next way that you can use Claygent is finding case studies and finding client information. See, most companies highlight this directly on their website. So you can reference those case studies in your outreach to build trust almost immediately. Because mentioning a company that they work with shows that you actually did your homework and you're not just sending random spammy emails to everybody. Now, let me show you how you can do that right inside of Claygent. So again, we're just going to open up a new instance of Claygent, and I also have a template for this one that we can use. So again, you're just going to want to configure that. If you don't have a template set up like I do, you can easily just go into generate, type exactly what you're trying to accomplish. We want you to go to this company's website, take a look for, pages including our work, case studies, testimonials, past work, portfolio, project, clients, reviews, so on. Basically all of the places where you'd potentially find a client testimonial. And then you're going to want to click generate. Once that's prepped, you just got to make sure everything's configured at the top. You're using 4.0 mini, you have your GPT key, and all is set here. If you want, you can make this conditional, like say, if hiring status wasn't found. So let's just say only run if response is equal to not hiring or not found. Then you're going to want to generate that formula. So that way, in this instance, if we have the hiring signal, we can make the copy around the hiring signal. And if we weren't able to find that, we can make it around the case study signal. So we're going to run this and we'll see how that goes. All right, so again, you can see Claygent has gone to their website, looked for any relevant case studies or company results, and has pulled those. So for one company, we have Hyundai Santa Fe, we have Revolution Nutrition, best bodies for life, hunter, fling. And then again, there's always going to be those that, don't have information or information wasn't found. And then we can jump in and, use conditional logic again to create a third scenario if we need. So we have our case study data from Claygent in Clay, and we want to use this in copy. And this can be used, 101 different ways. But one of the ways that we like to use it is referencing how we can help the prospects find customers similar to their best fit clients. So I just came up with a one-liner example here. If we could create lookalike audiences of your best fit prospects like Hyundai Santa Fe and generate new sales opportunities with them on your behalf, would that be worth a chat? And you can buff this up. You can say on a performance basis or whatever to make it a little more like enticing. But the idea being, looks like you did your homework. It includes a company that they got really good results for. And obviously that's something that they'd be interested in, or that's something that they would desire. Who wouldn't want more of their best fit prospects? Now, this next use case might actually be the most powerful out of all three, because instead of just scraping generic information, you can actually tell Claygent to go and find information that is hyper relevant to your offer. This way, it sounds like you understand every single thing about their exact situation and any problems that they may be experiencing, because that's ultimately the best way that you can establish trust. So here's how you do it in this situation. For this one, I jumped over to a different table because we use this exact example with a few different firms that we reach out to. So you can see in this table, we've got all of our standard information, first name, last name, email, so on and so forth. We've pulled LinkedIn URL, pulled a company summary. So you can see here, we basically just ran 4L Mini and asked it to go to the website, write a short summary about what the company does, who it serves, what service does it provide, typical customer base, basically incredibly comprehensive, and it's just going and making a 100 to 200 word paragraph. So this is providing context. Then we jump in this instance, we're reaching out to private equity firms and we want to know what their investment criteria is. So what are the types of businesses that they're looking for? And then here, again, we're using web research, asking it to go and determine the exact investment criteria. This is often found on the website, but again, we gave it some guidelines. These are some sections that it might exist. If you can't find it on the website, search the web, but make sure they belong to the right company. So that's the biggest thing. If you're sending Claygent to a specific website, you obviously know it's going to be correct. If you get it to do web research, on other websites, you have to make sure that it's actually pulling information of the actual company itself. Cool. And then we have the output in a comma separated list. And then you can see there's a bunch of conditional things here that we want to make sure that it follows. And then I won't get into these next two too much, but what we're doing with these ones, this isn't necessarily Claygent, but this is the create or modify version here. So instead of, doing web research, we're actually just having it analyze data and create a phrase based on the information that we've pulled in both company summary and investment criteria. So in this one, I want you to take the input, come up with a short sentence for an email, based on the information on your website. You guys seem to primarily invest in insert summary and investment criteria here. And then I gave it an example. And then this was for a different personalization. But as you can see here, the idea is to get all of this context around the exact thing that you're going to be pitching so that it looks like you wrote it exactly for them. It's one thing to pull a hiring signal or, a case study where it's just one variable, but to actually make it look like you wrote the whole email specifically for their situation, that's kind of the next level. So this is what the response ends up looking like. Based on the information on your website, you guys seem to primarily invest in digital infrastructure companies with a focus on data centers, fiber networks, and scaling operational expertise. Or there's going to be some here that specifically mention the EBITDA. Based on the information on your website, you guys seem to primarily invest in founder-owned B2B software companies with 10 to 30 million in ARR or less than 10 million in ARR. See, that's so specific. And when you tie that to an offer that's super relevant to that information, in our case, we're helping them find businesses that are like that. It's just a no-brainer, and it looks like you're really putting in that homework. Now, this last use case is perfect if you target leads locally in any way. See, you can use Claygent to scrape office locations and then make every single message look like a potential local meetup. This ends up turning cold email into, warm lunch invites, which obviously is far more well received than your typical cold pitch. Because while most people ask for sales calls, you're just asking for a coffee at their favorite coffee shop. So for this one, obviously we're going to open up Claygent. I don't believe I have a template for this one, so I'll show you guys exactly how I'd set it up if you don't. But essentially, I want you to find the headquarters of the company. This should be website generate. In hindsight, I probably should have said, yeah, no, I guess this is probably close enough. I'd wanted to find the exact address. So I'm just going to put this here and see if it'll add it to the prompt that I already created. The reason why I want to do this is because if we can find the exact address, we can suggest some sort of coffee shop or something really, really close to that exact address versus like just one that's within the city, which maybe they don't really know of. Awesome. So again, you're just going to want to make sure you have 4.0 mini set up, Claygent web research, have your API key, and we'll run 10 rows. So the fun with Claygent, you run the 10 rows. Sometimes it doesn't always work the way that you want it. What I'm going to do is actually have it start the prompt from scratch. I wanted that address. I think that's going to be the best way to get super relevant information. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to say, I want to find the exact address of the headquarters for company. And then again, we're just going to test this. Sometimes with address, you end up getting that data from Apollo. It kind of depends on what scraper you end up using. So you won't always need to use Claygent for this, but you definitely will for the next step. So now that we have our addresses, what we're going to want to do is pull up one more instance of Claygent. I want you to find the closest coffee shop to headquarters, and we're just going to want to configure this again. So generate, we'll probably want to flip that back to 4.0 mini. Not sure what it's doing here with the HTTP request, but let's just give it a run and see what happens. Looks like we actually used the wrong variable in here. So we're just gonna have to switch this to headquarters. We want headquarters address. Cool. Now let's test that one out. All right, cool. So we have that information. We have the HQ of the office and then the closest coffee shop. It even gave us some other information here, like the distance in miles, and some of the like Yelp and map request information, which we don't necessarily need. But obviously in practice, that could look something along the lines of this. So you're gonna have to make sure obviously that these prospects are local to you. So it is possible, like you're not, pitching a coffee meetup in Orlando when you're in California. But if you are in the same location, build a list of contacts that are in the same state or just within proximity to you. You can say something along the lines of like, hey, notice you guys are also located in Austin. How to look at your meta ad funnel and have a few ideas. Maybe we grab a coffee sometime and I can run you through them. P.S. I think Jenny's coffee shop is pretty close to your office if we want to try there. Again, this looks super conversational. It doesn't even really feel like a pitch. It's adding that familiarity, like I'm also a local guy, and like this shows that you did your homework. You're like, you know what, this coffee shop is right across the street from your office. You've probably heard of it. Let's just go there. So that's exactly how to use Clay's AI web scraper to personalize your messages at scale. But truthfully, personalization is just one piece of cold email, because to actually book meetings, you still need to avoid spam filters, come up with offers that people actually want, and filter out bad leads before jumping on calls. So if you want to see exactly how we did that, booking one of our clients 42 calls in just 30 days, you can check this video out here, and I'll see you there.